We're ready to kick off week 9 of the NFL season. Jets and Texans playing on Thursday Night Football. LockedOn Jets, LockedOn Texans, crossover Thursday here on the LockedOn Podcast Network.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Jets fans and Texans fans. It's crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Jets fans, you know me. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets. Texans fans, you know my colleague Brian Big Sarge Bearfield. And we're here today to preview Week 9 action. Jets and Texans kicking things off tonight at MetLife Stadium. You should know that crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Big Sarge, great to be with you. How are you this week?
Hey, man, thanks for having me, man. I love being there. The one thing that I don't know if I could live in the, what do they call it, the tri-state area? Is that what it's called?
That is the tri-state area. You got New York, New Jersey. I think Connecticut's the third state. I've lived here my whole life, and I
yeah. I don't know if I could live permanently in New York and New Jersey because I'm from the South and we move just a little bit slower than everything does up here. But I love it. I love coming here. I love being in New York. I love being in New Jersey. I love the weather, being able to walk around and stuff like that and breathe. So, Houston isn't a walking city like New York is. So every time I get a chance, I love coming to New York and just getting out doing, things I don't get a chance to do at home.
All right. Well, Big Sarge, when the schedule came out, I think a lot of people had this game schedule circled on the calendar as a potential matchup between two of the top teams in the conference. One of the teams has lived up to the hype, the other not so much. Let's start with the team that has lived up to the hype, the Houston Texans. What's going on in Houston this week?
One of the things that has been going on in Houston is after the Sunday's game against the Indianapolis Colts, where the Houston Texans won 23-22, improved to 6-2 on the season and take a commanding lead in the AFC South. The offensive line and the second half scoring is still a problem. For as many weapons as the Houston Texans have, and I know that they've been without Nico Collins for a couple of games. They've been without Joe Mixon for a couple of games. They missed Tank for a couple of games. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs got hurt in this game, and he is unfortunately out for the season with the torn ACL. But the Houston Texans in games with one score or less to win the game are 5-1. And when you have such a potent offense who is supposed to come in and just blow everybody away with the amount of talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball, they haven't gotten it done. And they are scoring 9.5 points in the second half. And so they're getting what they need to get done in the first half. They're just not making the second half adjustments as far as offense is concerned. And that may be an offensive coordinator issue. Maybe Bobby isn't making the necessary adjustments and coming out and giving the same looks to the defense. CJ Stroud, when I asked him about it on Tuesday, he said it's something that we definitely have to work on. DeMeco Ryans has talked about it in the past. But one of the biggest issues outside of the offense is scoring in the second half, some of the injuries that we talked about, they sustained injuries on the defense side of the ball. It's just, John, it's the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line is the most glaring problem that the Houston Texans are having right now, being able to protect CJ. They're not giving up a ton of sacks each game, but their quarterback pressure and everything that's around him is starting to cause CJ Stroud, it's starting to cause him to have happy feet sometimes, something we're not used to seeing, especially after his record-breaking rookie season that he had. It's starting to cause him to have some choppy feet, some happy feet, seeing some ghosts. And that's something that the Houston Texans, they remember when they had David Carr here. I think he was sacked one season 76 times, and he just looked uncomfortable in the pocket. And you don't want C.J. Stroud looking uncomfortable in the pocket, especially someone who has the talent to be a first ballot Hall of Famer if he continues on this trajectory. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, you get to talk about a first ballot Hall of Famer all the time as far as the quarterback position is concerned. But that offensive line has to be better. And it starts looking at Kenyon Green, left guard. He was out after his rookie season. He sat out his second year. He missed the entire year due to an injury. He's coming back this year. And so he's just now playing in this Bobby. He's played 8 games in this Bobby Slowick-led offense. but he was pulled last week against the Colts for performance. And one of the things about him was he took accountability and said that it was his fault. But John, it isn't just Kenyon. They have an entire offensive line issue, and they have an interior line issue. So Kenyon hasn't looked good, and hasn't looked good a lot of times. Center Juice Scruggs hasn't looked good a lot of times, and right guard Shaq Mason, who we expected to to be better, a 10-year veteran, Super Bowl champion. They just can't seem to pick up the stunts and the delayed blitz that are coming at them like that, which also at times you can see Titus Howard, right tackle, and Laramie Tunsil, left tackle, struggle. And so that offensive line unit is the biggest issue and the most glaring issue that the Houston Texans have right now. And going up against a front four like the New York Jets have, you don't want to have that type of communication issue, that type of performance issue when you're going up against the, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th-ranked defense in the NFL.
Sarge, let me ask you, how are things looking on the defensive side of the ball for the Texans?
The defensive side of the ball, they have listen, and although they have sustained some injuries as far as at the linebacker position, it'll be another week. I think this is the 3rd game, if I'm not mistaken, without Azeez Al-Shaair, middle linebacker, who was a key free agent pickup for the Houston Texans in the offseason from the Tennessee Titans. Him and D'Amico have great chemistry together from their time in San Francisco. He's the quarterback of the defense. But the one thing about having a player coach like D'Amico, and I mean like a player, former NFL player / coach, and I mean players coach as well in D'Amico Ryans, is that at that position he can help build up. He can coach up, any player. And they're getting Henry To'oTo'o back as far he set out with a concussion. And so Kamari Lassiter, the rookie cornerback, he had set out with the shoulder injury. He came back on last week. And so they're starting to, when you look at the linebacker position, they picked up Devin White 2 weeks ago. He's getting a lot of playing time. Neville Hewitt has stepped up. Jake Hansen has stepped up at the linebacker position. And so they look better. And I said all that because we know about Derek Stingley. I'm very interested to see this matchup as far as how Derek Stingley is going to play on one side of the ball, and your all-pro cornerback on the other side in Sauce Gardner. I'm curious to see how they're going to take each other's game level up because of their competitiveness. And so rookie Kalen Bullock at safety has been good. Now, you notice I talked about the linebackers, I talked about the cornerbacks, I talked about the safety, the rookies, I had to save the best for last. That defensive line unit is amazing. I'm talking about amazing. I'm talking about a destructive force. I'm talking about will impose their will on anybody. And look, that's pun intended when I say impose their will, because NFL defensive, rookie defensive player of the year for 2023, Will Anderson Jr. is having a career year. He's currently tied at 3rd with 7.5 sacks, which he only had sacks for last season for all of 2023 for all his rookie year. And so it starts with Will, and on the other side of Will is Danielle Hunter, who is top 5 in quarterback pressures, had double digits in quarterback pressures last week against the Indianapolis Colts with 12, had 2 sacks. And so when you have Will Anderson Jr. coming at you from one side being destructive, when you have Danielle Hunter coming from the other side being destructive, that leaves a lot of room for that interior defensive line to eat. And now you got Tim Settle, you got Foley Fatukasi, you got Khalil Davis, you got Danico Autry back, who they also use as a defensive tackle and a defensive end sometimes. And I mean, they just have a unit, a defensive line unit that is, as Danielle Hunter told me last week after the game, he said, we're 4 people that move as one, and we're always going to move as one. And so that's why I say the defensive line unit for last, because they are by far right now the heartbeat of the entire Houston Texans team.
All right, well, that is a fantastic scouting report on the Houston Texans. Ahead here on this crossover Thursday edition of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans, we're going to flip the script. I'm going to tell you everything that's going on with the New York Jets. And Jets fans, there's not a lot of good news to talk about, but we'll get into it here on this crossover Thursday edition of LockedOn Jets, LockedOn Texans here on the LockedOn Podcast Network. Our episode today of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan is not just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like you and I, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are the last to leave. We see you. This Thursday Night Football, that gives us a lot of energy just thinking about it. And you should know that 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day do list is always a mile long. And that's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. All right, crossover Thursday here on the LockedOn Podcast Network. John Butchko, host of LockedOn Jets, along with Brian Big Sarge Bearfield, co-host of LockedOn Texans. Sarge, where do we even begin with this Jets team? It is ugly right now in New York. Any question you ask, I'm probably not going to have an answer that's positive, but where do you want to start?
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you was, has Aaron Rodgers spelled out anything yet? Have you all gotten the RELAX yet? I haven't heard anything about that, especially, with a team that's 2-6, 0-5 on the current losing streak. And I only brought that up because I wanted to ask you all. I want to ask you, excuse me, were you all expecting more after Robert Saleh was fired from the New York Jets?
I think a lot of fans were. I was not. I saw it as a panic move. I was not a big Robert Saleh fan. So, here's the thing with the Houston Texans are such a likable team, yet they frustrate me because in 2021, the Jets hired a new coach who was the 49ers defensive coordinator. They hired the 49ers passing game coordinator as their offensive coordinator, and they drafted a quarterback 2 overall. And that's what the Houston Texans did a couple of years later. It worked out great for Houston. It worked out terribly for the Jets. I felt like it was like they promoted Jeff Ulbrich, who had done the defensive coordinator. He has literally 1 game of head coaching experience in his career. He was the head coach of the Senior Bowl this past January, February in Mobile. Throwing him into that situation was asking a lot. And he's maintained his duties as defensive coordinator. He's still calling the plays. He still has the title. He's been stretched awfully thin. I don't think the defense has played as well since they got rid of Saleh. I think the problem with the Jets is that this team is just fundamentally flawed. And I think once you get in season, you can maybe fix 1 thing, maybe 2. It's tough to fix an entire thing. I think the last couple of weeks every week there's been a new thing that's going to save the team. After the Jets lost to Minnesota, they fired Saleh, so the coaching change would save the team. They lose to Buffalo. The new thing is Devontae Adams. Trading for him is going to save the team. They lose the next game to Pittsburgh. Hassan Reddick comes back. Hassan Reddick's going to save the team. They lose this past week to New England. And this week's savior is Aaron Rodgers. I'm saying this somewhat jokingly, but Aaron Rodgers spoke this week about how he has discovered the benefits of drinking water with cayenne pepper. So water and cayenne pepper will save the Jets this week. That is the new salvation of the 2024 season for the New York Jets.
Yeah. So and the one thing that I am very interested in finding out from you, and you know what, the Houston Texans fan base wants to know too, going into Thursday night matchup, what has seemed to be the disconnect between Aaron Rodgers being able to get on the same page with his wide receivers? Like you mentioned, they went out and they traded and they got him, one of his old friends, one of his old throwing buddies, and Devontae Adams. But you also had Garrett Wilson here, and with a very, very good, 1-2 punch at the running back position.
I think the biggest issue is that Aaron Rodgers looks like he's 40 years old now. In his Green Bay days, he was a guy who was always good. The thing that really set him apart to me was his ability to extend plays. He may not have been a guy you designed a lot of runs for. He may not have called the zone read for him, but he was able to evade pressure. He was always pretty mobile, and he just can't do it anymore. And he's the conversion of pressures to sacks. His pressure to sack rate is really, really high. And I think a lot of that's just he's tried to evade pressure. He hasn't adapted his game. There are places where he used to be able to evade the pass rusher and he can't get away from them anymore. You see him unable to run away from 300-pound defensive tackles at this point. And the other aspect of this, which is, it's going to be really tough to fix. I don't think it is fixable. Is his body is just not holding up. He's been the last couple of weeks. He's been on the injury report. Originally, it was an ankle. Last week we added a knee and a hamstring. Father Time is undefeated, and
Yes.
it holds off for some guys. It took Tom Brady till he was like 44, 45. But for Aaron Rodgers, it's come. Actually, the connection with Garrett Wilson, which was a struggle early in the season, has improved the last couple of weeks. Garrett Wilson's had a couple 100-yard games. But Devontae Adams, another guy, maybe father who's being visited by Father Time. He's 31 years old. I think the Jets thought he was going to do big things. Under two games, he's under 100 yards total. So I think that this kind of underscores one of the issues the Jets had going into the season. I talked about it all summer long leading into the season on LockedOn Jets. This was a Jets team that was good on paper, but on paper was the operative term, because the two things that they had a lot of key players who were injury prone and a lot of key players who were in their 30s. And you never know what the aging curve is. Some guys can play at a really high level deep into their 30s. But some guys, it's like you can be great one year and when you hit your 30s, and then the next year it completely vanishes for you. And I think there are a number of guys, not just Rodgers and Adams, who are being visited by Father Time.
Yeah, and before I ask you about the defense, which I think that when you look at the New York Jets, you see how glaring they are with being ranked number 4 in the in total defense in the NFL. They're ranked second in passing defense, with giving up only 161 passing yards per game. Ranked 6th in total sacks, with 23. Before I get to that, I just got one more Aaron Rodgers question. Has he lost the locker room? Does his voice still resound in the locker room to be able to help these guys turn this season around by giving them some type of motivational speech? And I was joking earlier about the RELAX, but is there anything that he could say to help turn that locker room around and give them hope?
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. It seems like he's pretty well liked in the locker room, as far as I can tell. I don't think there's any issue. I just think the team is I think it's a case where maybe the spirit is willing and the flesh is like. I do think there are issues in the locker room. I mean, Devontae Adams, I've been saying this on LockedOn Jets. I don't know a polite way to say this. Devontae Adams quit on the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, everybody knows that. So the guy who pretty much quit on his old team shows up, and the first week he feels compelled to give a motivational speech because he doesn't like what he's seeing on the side. Like, that says something about the team. The locker room issue. It says something about the team's locker room right now. Now, I don't think it's an Aaron Rodgers thing. I think the issue with Aaron Rodgers is he's kind of old, but I don't know what Aaron Rodgers can really do, because I just don't think the team was talented on paper, but that when we said the team was talented on paper, that assumes Aaron Rodgers is going to play somewhere close to his career peak. It assumes Tyron Smith, the left tackles, famous for being a great tackle in Dallas, is going to play somewhere close to his career peak. Mike Williams, the guy they signed from the Chargers, he's really done nothing this year. Just a lot of guys who have aged. So I just don't know that there's anything that can be said. I don't know. I mean, I think there are locker room issues, but I think the bigger issue is that the team just doesn't have players who can perform at the level they used to.
Yeah. And now that we talked about all of the negative things, John, you got to tell me, what has kept this defense afloat and being able just to play to the level that they've been able to play to?
Oh man, I don't want to go negative again, but I think it's the caliber of offenses they've played, because they played the Patriots week 3, who were awful. They played the Titans week 2 with a very inconsistent Will Levis. They got Denver at a really bad weather game at the Meadowlands, where Bo Nix was really struggling to throw the ball. They got Minnesota, who was moving the ball really well in the first half, and then Aaron Jones got hurt, and their offense stalled in the second half. This defense is not horrible, but I don't think it's anywhere. I've said this. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as its statistics. And look, last week shows you they had twice in the fourth quarter. They had a chance to get a stop with the lead and end the game. Twice they let Jacoby Brissett, the backup quarterback, drive the field on them, and one for 70-yard touchdown. And they had 3 opportunities in those 2 drives. They had 3 opportunities on 3rd and long to get off the field and couldn't do it. The defense that's underperforming this year, guys who are stars, Quinnen Williams had a good game last week, but Quinnen Williams not playing up to his normal standard. Sauce Gardner, who's been flawless his first 2 years, he's even having kind of a disappointing year. He had a big catch against him on that game deciding drive. So I think that the defense has also been really shaky against the run at moments. I know, like, if you look at the statistics, it doesn't look that bad, but they have moments. They've had halves in almost every game where they've been absolutely gashed. Now they've had some games they've been able to bounce back in the second half. They've been played better, but it's a defense. I'm not gonna say it's a bad defense, but I think it's a defense that looks it's a defense that's more inconsistent than you would think looking at the numbers.
Oh wow, yeah, because I looked at the numbers. So are you telling me that I need to go down to the New York Stock Exchange and sell?
I would short this Jets defense, but look, there are some talented players on the defensive front going up against a Houston team, as you mentioned, has some line issues. Quinnen Williams has started to play better. Will McDonald, second-year guy out of Iowa State. Another guy who's maybe not as impressive as his sack total looks. There have been a number of unblocked plays where he's gotten sacks, but he's generating pressure at a good rate. He's shown an ability to beat offensive linemen. And Hassan Reddick, who is not the most popular guy in the Jets fan base, as you might imagine, after a lengthy holdout and did nothing in his debut last week, he's still got a good pedigree. So there is still talent. On the defensive line, there's talent that I think actually can elevate its game, and I think this defense can play better than it has. I think on the offense, it's a different story. I think the offense is dealing with a lot of older guys who just are not going to respond. But I think on the defensive side of the ball, there is a little bit of hope to see the Jets play. I mean, it's weird to say because you mentioned the numbers are so good, but I actually do think they can play at a more consistent level going forward. All right. Well, you've now heard about the Texans. You've heard about the Jets. Who's going to win this game? Ahead here on this crossover Thursday edition of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans, we're going to give you our keys to victory. You won't want to miss that. That's ahead here on this Thursday crossover edition of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans. Today's crossover Thursday of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Sarge, I don't know if you've been watching the line this week. It's actually moved quite a bit. Started with the Jets as 1.5-point favorites. Now the Texans are 1.5-point road favorites. Maybe that New England game caused the bettors to throw in the towel on the 2024 Jets. Well, again, FanDuel is the place to get in on the action because you get $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This crossover Thursday edition of LockedOn Jets and LockedOn Texans is also brought to you by Built Rewards. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in a loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with over 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedon. That's joinbilt.com/lockedon. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John from Locked On Jets, along with Brian Big Sarge Bearfield, co-host of Locked On Texans. Sarge, what are your keys to victory for the Texans in this one?
In order for the Houston Texans to win, they have to protect C.J. Stroud. This is a game where the Houston Texans, let's just throw the records out, looking at the Jets' record as far as where they what the standings are and what they're currently going through. It starts and stops with those guys up front being able to protect C.J. and give him time, especially after losing Stephon Diggs for the season and not having Nico Collins, who won't be back until week 10 against the Detroit Lions. And so now you're looking at Tank Dell, you're looking at John Mechie, you're looking at Xavier Hutchinson, you're looking at Robert Woods. CJ has to have the time to be able to throw to a couple of guys he's not used to throwing to on a consistent basis in Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie, who's going to play a very huge part in getting that offense to roll. But in order for him to be able to do that, that offensive line has to, we're going into the second half of the season now. They have to step up. They've seen what every team has tried to do to them as far as some of those stunts and those delayed blitzes has happened. And so you want to be able to protect CJ on the offensive side of the ball so he can help in that second half to get over some of those offensive woes that they have. On the defensive side of the ball, they just have to continue doing what they have been doing for the last 8 weeks, and that is getting after the quarterback, that is putting pressure on the quarterback, causing quarterbacks to make errant throws, causing quarterbacks to throw interceptions and cause turnovers. They have to continue to wreak havoc, and they have to live by their mantra, which is swarm. Continue swarming to the ball, and that defense has done an amazing job in doing that. And so, at any point in time, we talked about Aaron Rodgers earlier, but at any point in time, Aaron Rodgers, you never know when that water and cayenne pepper may kick in this week, and he may go back to 2014 Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden he's found that fountain of youth. And if he does that, he wants to throw the ball, all over the field. Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter can't allow him to be able to do that. Collapse that pocket, push him into those violent defensive linemen, and I think that the Texans could win if they have that on the offense and the defensive side of the ball.
All right, so I'll give you my Jets key. And the first one is more of an emotional thing. Jets are coming off a horrible loss. They've lost 5 in a row, and it really feels like the season's lost because even Aaron Rodgers, prior to the game last week against New England, he said, our season will be decided in the next 5 games. Jets entered that game at 2-5, and they said, we beat New England, we beat Houston, we're 4-5, we're right in this. Well, they've already lost the front end of that. And you always get to this point of the year, and look, the head coach is already gone, so you don't even. It's sometimes when the coach is on the hot seat, he's going to be fired. You get into this situation, coach is already gone now. The question is, are the Jets going to keep fighting? And I think that's look. I mean, everybody's got to put good film. It's, your film is your resume in the NFL. But that there are times where a team kind of falls out of the race, and emotionally they're kind of drained, and that doesn't mean the Jets aren't going to try in this game, but you fall behind 7-0, 10-0 early, and it gets here we go again. And I think Jets need to show fight in this game. We're going to find out how much this team's going to continue fighting. So that's number one. Number two, Aaron Rodgers, don't forget your cayenne pepper and water. Jokingly. Number two, the real number two is kind of the inverse of one of the things you mentioned, which is Jets have to get pressure on CJ Stroud. Last year, I think maybe one of the most surprising results of the NFL was the game these teams played in early December, where the Jets beat the Texans, a Jets team that was going nowhere against the Texans team that was playing some good football and ended up winning the AFC South. Jets were able to get to Stroud in that game. As you mentioned, the Texans have some issues up front on the offensive line. So this is a Jets defense that's been inconsistent with the pass rush outside of Will McDonald, but with Hassan Reddick, maybe week 2 for Hassan Reddick will go better than week 1. Quinn and Williams starting to round into form after a very disappointing start to the season. I think that getting to CJ Stroud is important. You always want to make a quarterback uncomfortable. I think that's kind of an evergreen thing, but nobody likes to get hit. And you start speeding up an internal clock if you're generating consistent pressure with and that's true of any quarterback. And number 3, special teams. Special teams, even though the Jets have been a really bad team over the last decade plus, most years their special teams have actually been really good. They have a good coordinator in Brant Boyer. Their special teams have been awful this year. The kicking game's been an issue. Greg Zuerlein went on IR. He's missed kicks left and right, and I don't like blaming losses on the kicker, especially because the Jets are supposed to be better. A lot of Jets fans were saying if it wasn't for the kicker, we'd be 5-3 right now. I think that their games should never come down to kicks. But Zuerlein has struggled this year. He's been placed on IR, and now there's all these conspiracy theories. Is he really hurt? Are the Jets trying to which I think he actually is hurt, and I was actually kind of wondering whether he's hurt, because every year you see kickers otherwise good kickers who just have these awful seasons, and then it comes out they were trying to kick through an injury. And kicking mechanics are so precise that an injury just throws you off, throws you completely off, off your game. And I was actually kind of wondering because like Zerline had been a really reliable kicker for the Jets the last couple of years. Now he can't make anything. He can't make an extra point. Jets signed 2 kickers to their practice squad. One of those 2 guys will take over. But Jets' special teams have just been bad this year. They allowed big punt return last week that kind of turned that game around in the early third quarter. Jets were kind of like the Jets were in control of that game. Patriots ran a punt back, gave their offense a short field. They scored a touchdown. That was back and forth the rest of the way. So I think the Jets need to win the special teams battle. So I think those are my three. Those are my keys, Sarge. Along with the cayenne pepper. That's the fountain. I think Rodgers actually used the phrase "the fountain of youth" with the cayenne pepper. So maybe Aaron Rodgers will be able to run around again like he did 10 years ago.
Hey, John, you think that after the game when we're in the locker room, maybe I could pull up to the side and be like, and you got any extra? Because see all this gray hair? This isn't from I mean, you see all this right here, all this? This isn't from donuts. This is gray hair. I'm old too, Aaron. I'm getting old. You think you got any more of that fountain of youth juice?
I'll tell you what, if Rodgers throws for 350 in this game, I'm going to have a cup of water before I go to bed Thursday night. He'll turn me into a believer. Well, Sarge, great chatting with you. Wish the Texans luck the rest. Not so much tonight, but wish the Texans luck the rest of the way. I feel like us. I don't know if the Texans are cursed, but they never won a Super Bowl. Us long-suffering franchises, we have to stay together. So I don't think we'll meet in the playoffs this year. But wish you and your team luck the rest of the way after tonight.
Hey man, same to you.
And Jets fans and Texans fans, thanks so much for making this show your first listen every day. And tune in tomorrow. We'll recap the game on LockedOn Jets. I'm sure Big Sarge will do the same on LockedOn Texans. We'll chat with you then.